Coming up on Chapman News, an update on the horrific subway shooting in New York, and a look at mass transit close to home. Is crime up in LA? We have the numbers.
And a major victory for Ukraine, sinking a Russian warship in the Black Sea.
And an in-depth look at how Serena Williams may have experienced medical racism. All that and more on this edition of Chapman News.
From Dodge College of Film and Media Arts, this is Chapman News.
Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of Chapman News. I'm Promise Johnson.
And I'm Claire Weber. We begin this morning with the very latest on the subway shooting in New York and ask the question, just how safe is mass transit here? 62-year-old Frank James was arrested, charged, and is being held without bail. He is suspected of committing a terrorist act on a mass transit system. 26 people were injured during a shooting at the Sunset Park subway station in Brooklyn. If convicted, James could face life in prison. Our Adrienne Mitchel takes a closer look at the shooting and what it means for other cities. And as a warning, some of these images are graphic.
Smoke grenades and gunshots. People flee for their lives during morning rush hour.
There was a lot of blood trailing on the floor. And at the time, in the moment, I did not think that it was a shooting because it sounded like fireworks. All I saw were people trampling each other, trampling over each other, trying to get through to the door, which was locked, and there was just a lot of panic.
This incident comes just 2 months after New York Mayor Eric Adams announced his campaign to crack down on crime and gun violence. Crimes on New York public transit systems have increased by 65% this year. And the problem isn't only in New York. Adams warns about rising crime nationwide.
But this is not only a New York City problem. This rage, this violence, these guns, these relentless shooters are an American problem.
According to LA County Metropolitan Transportation Authority data, reports of violent crimes in Los Angeles in 2021 were up 25% from 2020 and up 9% from 2019. The LAPD crime data set shows an increase in aggravated assaults with a deadly weapon on metro buses in LA from 2017 to 2021. This increase in crime is notably coupled with a decrease in ridership. The metro lost about 70% of its ridership during the height of the pandemic. And currently, ridership is only 65% of pre-pandemic levels. With crime being brought to the forefront of people's minds, Rick Caruso is looking favorable to become the next Los Angeles mayor. Caruso is running on a platform of increasing public safety and ending homelessness. I'm Adrienne Mitchel for Chapman News.
And breaking news, 900 civilians' bodies have been found in and around the capital of Kiev, and suspicion of chemical weapons being used in Mariupol arises. Peyton Bell is here with an update.
It's been 1 month and 15 days since Russia launched a full-scale attack on Ukraine. More than 4.6 million refugees fled Ukraine to neighboring countries so far, with more than 580,000 leaving this month alone. Russia is increasing efforts to secure cities along the Eastern Front, and Russia is now using heavy weaponry and alleged chemical warfare to lay siege on cities like Mariupol. Zelensky has also urged countries to put tougher sanctions on Russia to push them toward, quote, real peace. On Tuesday, Japan approved sanctions on Russia, freezing financial assets of nearly 400 individuals, including members of Putin's family. As allies across the world continue to provide aid to Ukraine and put harsher sanctions on Russia, Finland and Sweden have made a major step toward joining NATO after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The two countries say the invasion has, quote, changed its security environment. If Sweden and Finland join the organization, NATO claims the Baltic Sea region could, quote, see a rise in stability of the region in the long term. The war doesn't seem to end anytime soon, and we can only watch as the conflict moves eastward. I'm Peyton Bell for Chapman News.
Tensions aren't only rising across Europe, but here in the States as well.
Ryan Deeb is here with your political report.
Thanks, ladies. We have a lot of news coming out of the Capitol this week, plus news from Orange County. First, an update on the January 6th committee's investigation. The January 6th committee is still collecting information on the U.S. Capitol riot in early 2021. The committee has determined that they have enough information to make a criminal referral against Donald Trump, but are still split on the decision to do so. This week, Stephen Miller, former aide to Donald Trump, appeared before the committee. Miller resisted the initial subpoena, even attempting to sue the committee after calling him to testify. And Dr. Oz clearly has some big fans, not only of his career in TV, but on the campaign trail. Former President Trump recently endorsed Mehmet Oz in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. During a rally in North Carolina, Trump discussed their shared history as television stars and feels Oz is the most electable candidate.
Great guy, good man, Harvard educated, tremendous career, and they liked him for a long time. That's like a poll. You know, when you're in television for 18 years, that's like a poll.
The Placentia-Yorba Linda School Board is banning critical race theory from being taught in classrooms, making them the first board in Orange County to do so. Critical race theory teaches racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but embedded in legal systems and policies. The Placentia and Yorba Linda ban is in effect starting now in K-12 schools. And that concludes your political update for the week. Back to you, Promise.
Have you seen more cats in your neighborhood? We'll have more on how feral cats are taking over Orange County.
Traveling for Easter Sunday? Don't ditch that face mask. Haley Montez has the latest updates on mask mandates for planes after the break.
On today's edition of Chapman News, breaking news out of Ukraine, more civilian targets, the desperate search for victims, and we'll talk with a refugee worker who's covered many of the world's hotspots.
Is there another train heading our way? We'll look at the alarming increases in cases in Western Europe.
Heading out for spring break? We've got you covered. The hotspots and some secret getaways right here in the OC. That and more on this edition of Chapman News.
From Dodge College of Film and Media Arts, this is Chapman News.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this week's edition of Chapman News. I'm Kinsley Rolfe.
And I'm Haley Montez.
We begin this morning with breaking news. The Russian invasion of Ukraine reaches day 23. Russia continues its attacks on civilians. 130 people have been rescued after an estimated 1,000 people were trapped under the rubble of a blown-up theater in Mariupol. Ukrainians were using the theater as a shelter from missiles. The Russian government denies this air raid ever happened.
In the war of words, Zelensky appeals to NATO nations for more weapons. The U.S. readies more aid. But is it too little too late? And Biden calls Putin a war criminal. A lot of this happening in our nation's capital. As the president prepares to travel to Brussels for an emergency meeting with allies, Kiana Favela is here with the details. Kiana?
Thanks, Haley. The war on Ukraine continues. Estimates predict that at least 7,000 Russian troops and 1,300 Ukrainian troops have been killed, although the actual number may be much higher.
President Joe Biden will be traveling to Europe next week for an emergency NATO meeting on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, an invasion that Biden says is led by a war criminal, a term he has been reluctant to describe Putin as in the past.
I think he is a war criminal. Will you be meeting with us?
Russian government suggested that more sanctions will be announced against U.S. lawmakers, businessmen, and media people in the near future. These sanctions are symbolic more than anything, as no one on the stop list was planning to travel to Russia anytime soon. I'm Kiana Favela. Back to you, Haley.
3 million. That's the number of Ukrainian refugees who have fled their country. The biggest refugee crisis since World War II. Among those refugees, the UN says 75,000 a day are children. We talked with a woman who's worked with refugees in many of the world's hotspots. Sophia Chacon is here with that story. Sophia?
Thanks, Haley. My older sister, Gia Chacon, has worked in conflict zones all over the world. we asked her what she thinks about the crisis in Ukraine.
Refugees have now fled Ukraine, which is the fastest growing refugee crisis by any one country since World War II. So this is absolutely devastating what is happening in the Ukraine, and we need all the attention that we can get on this issue and as much relief as we can possibly send to the people who are suffering so much as a result of this war.
The suffering of the Ukrainian people goes deeper than just them being forced out of their country.
It's not only that they're suffering violence, that they're losing their nationality, but so much of it is actually the individual losing their identity.
As millions leave everything behind, they are seeking shelter and safety. Chacon mentions that the process is fast and immediate.
Usually when it comes to the situation where you're forced to leave your country, it's something that happens instantly. So you have to make the decision. What are you going to bring? Can you bring anything? And oftentimes people are fleeing their countries with nothing but their children and their passports in their hands.
My sister Gia Chacon talking to us from Cairo, Egypt. She hopes to go to Poland, but it may be too dangerous right now. Back to you at the news desk.
Journalism can be a dangerous profession, and now we learn that Russian forces have killed 3 journalists in Ukraine within the past week. Fox News cameraman Pierre Zakchevsky and field consultant Alexandra Kushanova were struck by a Russian shell outside Kyiv. They were joined by their producer Benjamin Hall, who is seriously injured but is expected to survive. Brent Renaud and fellow journalist Juan Arredondo were attacked while passing through a checkpoint in Lviv. Arredondo was injured and separated from his friend. Tragically, Renaud was hit in the neck and died on the scene. Arredondo described the attack while being cared for at a nearby hospital. He was unaware of his partner's fate.
We got into a car, somebody offered to take us to the other bridge, and we crossed the checkpoint and they start shooting at us. So the driver turned around and they kept shooting. It's 2 of us. My friend is Brent Renaud, and he's been shot and left behind.
These journalists gave their lives to keep the public informed despite the most dangerous conditions. Our hearts go out to their families and the families of any other lives lost in this conflict.
We know the war in Ukraine is hitting us at home in terms of higher gas prices, adding to what's being called runaway inflation. This week, the Federal Reserve is taking steps to hopefully slow the economy down, making money more expensive. The Fed approved the first interest rate hike since 2018. The Fed increased their interest rate by 1/4 point and plans 6 more increases this year. The move hopes to address the worst inflation in more than 40 years. Higher interest rate combats inflation by making borrowing more expensive. This leads to fewer investments, less demand, and may ultimately keep prices from soaring further.
But just drive down the street and you'll see prices are soaring. The national average for gas prices is currently $4.29. Our Adrienne Mitchel takes a look at why gas is now so pricey.
Students are starting to pass on gas.
I used to just go on drives all the time and go to the beach with my friends, but now I have to make everything concise and you can't have the fun trips.
I've probably thought about going to get a bike every day, multiple times a day since gas has raised.
Every day I pass by the prices, it's okay, it's just getting worse. It's just hard to watch.
Yeah. But what am I gonna do, not get gas?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a choice.
I'm still confused as to why it's that way, and I know it has to do with Russia, but everyone's putting blame on different people.
Thompson isn't the only one confused. Most of Russia's oil goes to Europe and Asia. So if the U.S. barely uses Russian oil, why is the Ukrainian invasion hiking up our prices? Oil is priced through a global market, meaning what happens in one area of the world affects another. And Russia is the world's second largest oil supplier.
Here in Orange, gas prices are $5.99. Gas prices are based on the principle of supply and demand. When supply is low, prices rise. And because of sanctions, Russian oil supply is low. So why can't other countries make up for the lack of Russian oil? In short, the pandemic.
Gas production was cut by 10% globally to support pandemic prices. And oil producers are still struggling with staffing and sourcing specialized equipment. According to a Wall Street estimate, this rise in gas prices may make a typical family pay an extra $2,000 this year. Uber Eats driver Quincy Eggert is already fed up.
What I'm doing is I'm paying now $60 to move a little meter from here to here. It's invisible. I mean, I know gas is real, but I never see the gas going into my car. I just stick a nozzle in my car and then, I can drive again.
To help Eggert and other drivers with gas costs, Uber and Lyft are creating a fuel surcharge of anywhere from 35 to 55 cents that goes directly into the driver's pockets. Experts say gas prices will likely remain elevated for weeks, if not months. This is Adrienne Mitchell for Chapman News.
The Senate passed legislation Tuesday to officially change daylight saving time. For the time being, we have sprung forward, and if the bill passes, we will no longer be falling back.
Well, I always say it's better to move forward than fall back. And speaking of moving forward, a Chapman professor is moving forward with a lawsuit against students.
We'll find out more about that after the break.
And I'll give you a special spring break weather report, no matter where you're going. Stay tuned.
Hello, I'm Caroline Applegate, here with your COVID report. The government only has enough doses for immunocompromised individuals. That's all for your COVID report. Back to you, Haley.
The days are getting longer and the weather is warming up.
Well, no wonder, it's almost spring. Colin Gaja is in the Weather Center with more on what weather we can expect both in Orange and in top spring break destinations. Colin?
Thank you, ladies. I'll be your weekly weather reporter today, and I'll be seeing you guys next week. Thank you for tuning in.
In a story you might not believe, a business and economics teacher at Chapman University is suing students for allegedly cheating on 2 tests last spring.
For Chapman News, I'm Callista Kirk.
On our crazy campus over break, we have some Orange County hidden gems to check out over your staycation.
Welcome back to the Best Campus Sports Show. I'm Ryan Deeb, so stay tuned to the Best Campus Sports Show for more updates.
Disney's response to the Don't Say Gay bill, Pixar's Turning Red, Turning Heads, and MGM being bought. We have that and more after the break.
The Oscars are coming up, and our very own Callista Kirk took a dive into how students get into the award shows.
With just over a week to go, I checked in to see how everyone is spending Hollywood's biggest night. For Chapman News, I'm Callista Kirk.
We wanted to hear your thoughts on who'd win the Oscars this year, so we created a survey and shared it across social media. Well, now for your entertainment report, Peyton Bell.
Hey guys, I'm Peyton Bell, and it's time to get poppin' with the latest in Hollywood. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to make those Oscar picks. Back to you at the desk.
Thanks, Peyton. For all you Panthers staying local for spring break, this next story is for you.
We have Emma Sexton here to show us some Orange County hidden gems.
Lucky for us, Southern California is one of the best places to be during spring break. Back to you at the desk.
Man, now I wish I was staying here for spring break.
Me too. Well, that's all we have for this week. Be sure to check out our YouTube page at chapmannews.tv. And make sure to follow us at Chapman News. I'm Kinsley Rolfe.
And I'm Haley Montez. Next week we will be on break. We'll see you April 1st. Same time, same place.